So there you are. It's Berlin. It's 1991. You're trying to keep a low profile due to certain activities in your past. You're running a little fast food outlet. Everything's going fine. Then you accept an invitation on behalf of a friend to an awards ceremony. Before you know it, you've met some very strange people. You're covered in a rash that no one else can see. You're having very strange dreams and nightmares, and you're seeing the ghost of your dead girlfriend screaming at you. Oh, and there's maggots. Lots and lots of maggots. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, we descend into the dark world of Kult. Hi folks, I'm Rob Poyton. Thanks for joining me today, where I'm talking RPGs and specifically Kult. I'm actually involved in playing two RPGs at the moment. As you'll know if you've been following the channel, I'm involved in a Rolemaster campaign down at Bedford Gladiators, run by Darren. Really enjoying that. Now, Rolemaster, of course, is what you call a classic fantasy setting. Kult is a modern horror game, so in a lot of ways the two are polar opposites. However, they do share some interesting similarities. More about that later. Now, as you may know, if you saw my previous piece about Rolemaster, I have struggled to get my head around some of the rules. Rolemaster is very, very number heavy and very table heavy. Your character sheet is about 3 or 4 pages long. There's stats for everything. There's a table for pretty much everything. I got my head around the combat pretty quick, but recently we just finished one part of the adventure, so we were on that getting experience points between level stage, and I have to admit I really was struggling. Darren kindly took me aside and spent some time going through it, and now I think I've got a better understanding of how the levels work, how you allocate points for your various skills, and everything else. I think still not to the extent that I'd feel confident running the game, but I certainly am enjoying playing it. And our party is doing quite well. We've got a new addition. We've got Sean has come in playing a sort of rogue thief type character. And we've even got our own house now. We've been given a little townhouse as a reward for some services rendered to one of the big merchant families. So it's this nice mix of sort of wilderness adventuring, but also there's a lot of political intrigue and that kind of thing going on as well, which I do enjoy in a game, I have to say. So, as I said, in many ways, Rolemaster is very different from Kult in that Kult is very low on statistics and dice rolls. I'll explain more about that as we go along. However, one thing they really do have in common is this idea, I feel at least, of the time you spend in the game. What I mean by that is these games both seem to be run sort of day by day, even hour by hour. So this isn't a game where between adventures, oh, we go to the dungeon of Thrak and we find the treasure, and then we go back somewhere and we sit around for a few weeks until someone posts a notice in the tavern, adventurers wanted, and off we go again. There is as much time spent on that between adventure stuff or between scenario or module stuff as there is on the actual adventure itself. So, as I said in Rolemaster, that mostly takes the form at the moment of being in the city with all these various intrigues going on. In Kult, we are in Berlin in 1991, as I mentioned at the start. My character Sergei has been drawn into this situation. To be frank, he doesn't really have a clue what's going on. And the play is, what are you doing this morning when you get up? You're going to go there, you're going to do this, then this afternoon, what are you going to do? So, again, a lot of the time is spent almost in sort of real time, one for one time, rather than this weeks flying by without anything happening. So, that makes the game quite intense. Cult Like Rolemaster is not a new game. It was first released in 1991 in Sweden, I believe. Hence the Ove connection, because he is a Swedish gentleman. And I suppose you'd call it a game of investigative horror or occult investigation. So straight away, people are going to think Call of Cthulhu. That's what it's likely going to be compared with. I did have a copy of this game back in the day, but we never really got around to playing it. I think at that time we'd sort of just moved into Vampire Masquerade, so that was taking up a lot of our RPG space, if you like. Of course, prior to that, I had run a lot of Call of Cthulhu as well. So I'll probably do comparisons more with Cthulhu than with Vampire in this, although, again, Cult does share some similarities with both. The version that Ove is running is 4th edition, which I believe came out in 2018. And I think there have been some quite major changes in the rules. I have to say, as an investigation game, I'm really enjoying it. It's working really well. We've played maybe about 5 or 6 sessions. Oh, I should mention Matt as well, because it's just the two of us playing in Cult. There are just two player characters. So a contrast really to Rolemaster, where there's your standard sort of 5 or 6 characters making up the party. With Cult, it's just the two of us. So we're both having to do quite a lot of heavy lifting. And again, that is something that is making the sessions even more intense. Alongside this is the setting. I don't really know what the setting is. I mean, the setting is Berlin in 1991, obviously. But the nice thing for me is I don't know anything about the lore, anything about the mythology, anything of what's going on. This is in contrast for me with Call of Cthulhu, where, of course, because I've been playing that for so long, because I'm well into my Lovecraft and everything else, I have a pretty good mythos knowledge, which might, explain something about my sanity. But it does mean a little bit when I see something in a Call of Cthulhu scenario, I can think, oh yeah, that's Yog Sothoth. Right, so we need some powder of Ibn Ghazi, we need a banishing ritual, we need John Dee's copy of the Necronomicon. You know, it's a cosmic horror game, but there is so much that is known to me, it does take a little bit of that edge off. What I'm finding with Cult is we have a vague idea that the game was sort of based a little bit on Clive Barker, Hellraiser type horror fiction, and we have an idea that there is this reality beyond our world, and that the majority of the population are what they call sleepers. They're all asleep, and gradually through this process of finding things out, you become more and more awake. So that's a little bit akin to the mythos knowledge, the sanity levels in Call of Cthulhu. But I would say so far, at least from what I've seen, it's done it in a much more subtle way. And in fact, to date, I think, so we're about 6 sessions in. So, what's that, 20, 25 hours of gameplay. We've not encountered one single monster or creature. Certainly, we've been involved in violence, physical, and gunfire. We've got those horrible visions and nightmares, and one or two of those I won't go into because they're very gruesome. But we've not encountered a zombie or a deep one or a thing with 10 legs, nothing like that at all. So to me, it feels very much rooted in the real world, and to an extent, it reminds me of the last big Call of Cthulhu campaign that I ran, well, probably back in the 90s, which was set in modern day London. And what I did for that is I stripped right back on a lot of the mythos elements, and it was concerning much more human cults and organised crime and how these two things merge together. So, in that sense, it gives me more of a feel of that type of play rather than the scenario where you've got to go in and blow the deep ones up with dynamite. What I'm finding that also means is you put a lot more time and investment into your character. Now, that's not to say that Cult isn't dangerous, because as we've both found out, both characters found out, you get into a fist fight, you get into a gunfight, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer broken ribs, you're going to take possibly a bullet wound, and obviously that's going to have a major effect on your ability to investigate. So, combat is very realistic in that sense, and it's not something you particularly go looking for unless the odds are really in your favour, or unless, like my character, you're very sneaky and good with a knife. So, in game terms, I'm finding that means I'm putting a lot more into the development of my character, and in fact, both Matt and I had to write out extensive backgrounds for our character, including a dark secret, which is a feature of the game. That's, I suppose, one of the hooks to draw you into the various situations and scenarios. And as characters, we don't really know each other. There was no connection other than this mutual friend. So it's quite interesting as we go along. We're sort of discovering more about each other's character as well. And obviously, we both know that we each have this dark secret, but we don't really know what it is yet. So that adds an extra dynamic to the interaction between the player characters as well. Speaking of characters, I'll just show you my character sheet here. And the first thing you'll notice is there's very few statistics on it. You have a certain amount of points to start with, and you allocate these to various attributes. And you'll notice, if you know your occult stuff, this is structured like the Sephiroth. So that's a nice little touch as well. And as you can see, you don't even have scores. So you're not really rolling a percentage to succeed in something. How it works is you'll see you have these bonuses or negatives here. So if you've got very strong willpower, for example, like my character has, that gives a +2. How this works is when you come to roll something for any sort of action you do, you'll get that bonus or that negative to your dice roll. This then is a major contrast between Kult and games like Rolemaster or Cthulhu, where you have all your skills laid out. And the way it works is if I want to do something, let's say I want to sneak out of a room. Well, I'll give you an example from actual gameplay. Sergey was in someone's flat looking for some items. Don't ask how he got in there, that's part of his murky past. And is rifling around looking for a journal or something like that, and he hears the front door go. He runs and he hides in the bedroom in one of those cupboards with the Louvre doors, because this is the 90s, right? And some heavies come in. They look like some bodyguard types that we'd encountered earlier, certainly not people I want to mess with. They go into the kitchen at one point, so Sergey thinks, great, I'm going to head for the front door. I'm going to see if I can get out without them seeing and escape and get away. So how it works is, rather than rolling perhaps a sneak skill and then a hide skill or that kind of thing, I just make one dice roll. You roll 2d10 in Kult. 15 and above is a success. If you roll 9 or under, it's a failure. If you roll between 10 and 14, then it's a partial success. So I make that one dice roll, which then covers this whole situation. And this interested me because Ove mentioned it, and I never really thought about it actually, but he says, as the game master in Kult, I never roll a dice. So this is in contrast to every other RPG I've played, whereas the GM, you're behind your screen rolling, do they spot them, do they do this, do they do that? It all just works on that dice roll that I make. Now, as it turned out, I rolled a 10, I think, so it wasn't a complete success. So we then play this out as me getting to the door unseen, but they've put the chain across it. Very security conscious, these guys. That means I've got to spend a minute fumbling around. They hear me from the kitchen. I manage to get out, but they're in pursuit. And they start shooting at me, and I take a bullet wound. So, well, not a serious wound, but enough to cause me some issues. Anyway, I managed to escape. That overall then is what counts as a partial success, in that I escaped, but I was noticed and I took a wound in doing so. So in that sense, it's a very neat, compact system, and that calls for a lot of role playing and interaction between the game master and the player. And I really enjoyed this because I do like narrative in my games. In fact, my character Sergey is based on a character I wrote into a book called Target that I brought out, I think a year or two ago. That was set in 80s London and revolved around organised crime and a certain Russian hitman and some other things. Anyway, if you'd like to take a look at that, that's available up on Amazon. So this narrative aspect really appeals to me, where I'm not just rolling, okay, I rolled a percentage there, I get out to the door, I roll another dice to see this, they rolled a dice to see that, they rolled a dice. That's fine, I don't have any problem with that. But I think what Kult does is it really enhances the narrative aspect of the game by using this system. So I referenced strange rashes and horrible nightmares and visions of deceased loved ones coming back. Kult is a dark game. It is a grim game. Now, I know Call of Cthulhu can also be very grim, and indeed, if we take someone like Lovecraft, or even more so someone like Thomas Ligotti, at their most bleak, then that could make for a very dark role playing experience. I do think in some ways that's sort of offsetting Call of Cthulhu by this. Well, again, speaking personally, for me, this familiarity with what's going on. And it's always this difficult balance to achieve in a game. You have some sort of entity, whether that's a cosmic entity or it's alien or it's supernatural, part of its power, if you like, part of the horror of the situation is this idea of the unknown. You haven't got a clue what this amorphous blob with tentacles is. It looks like it shouldn't even exist in our dimension. So there's the effect on your sanity. However, as a player, you know, oh yes, it's got 68 hit points, it's immune to bullets, but we can destroy it with acid, and so on and so on. Now, it could be that that's the way Kult will go because I'm new to it and I don't really know the background and the lore. But at the moment, as me and Matt often say, we haven't got a clue what is going on. We feel like we're getting slowly drawn into this, this sort of conspiracy in a way, I suppose, and we're starting to realise the extent of it. Uh, at the moment, from the authorities' point of view, it's being put down to a satanic cult. But we're both of the mind that there's far more than just that going on. So, in a sense, we're learning about the horrors of this world the same time as our characters do, which makes for a very nice, if somewhat grim, role playing experience. Yeah, and I can't emphasize again grim. This is for people who are interested in dark horror, and I suppose, like any game now, it's always best if you're unsure to have a sort of ground zero session, right? Where you can set out people's limits and people can talk about things that might make them feel uh, uncomfortable. I mean, in a horror game, you want to feel uncomfortable at points, but of course, everyone will have their own level and limit on that as well. But yeah, if you were looking for an RPG, you could set up and have a quick sort of run through, you know, kill some monsters, whatever, have a bit of a laugh, like, you know, things like Morkborg or that sort of stuff. Although, having said that, Morkborg can be pretty grim as well. But if you're looking for that sort of role playing experience, then I wouldn't recommend Kult. This is for people who are into that Barker-esque Lovecraftian type horror and who enjoy a good investigation game as well. Oh, and as far as the idea of sanity goes in Kult, well, there's an attribute called stability, which you may have noticed on the character sheet there. You start off relatively normal or level, and of course, as you undergo a particular shock or a particular experience, you can go down that list. So you can become shaken, you can become distressed, you go all the way down through neurotic and various other states of mind. And again, I get the impression this isn't like you see this and you lose X amount of points. This is more by feel from the game master again. I think if something new and horrible happens that you haven't experienced before, you're probably going to drop down a couple of levels. And of course, you can come back up. You can regain some stability as well by doing things that you enjoy doing, by relaxing with some friends, maybe playing some music. Funnily enough, with both our characters, Matt and I, we both have pet cats who we're very fond of. So spending some time with your cat is always good for sanity. I feel like there's an important life lesson in there somewhere. There we are then. That's a quick overview of Kult, at least in my experience over those last 6 sessions or so. I would say if you're looking for a good investigative dark horror game, then this is excellent. It really hits the spot. It might not be to everyone's taste or style of play, but I'm finding, and Matt is finding as well, we're both really getting drawn into this narrative. And we both said we found ourselves at times, you're sitting there at home, you should be working or doing something, you think, ah, so I wonder perhaps if we do that and go there, you know, we're trying to figure it out. So it's got a very strong sort of puzzle element or investigative element, but one that feels very real as well. Because as I say, as we go through, we're uncovering layers and layers of what seems to be this wider conspiracy. Anyway, I'll let you know how we're getting on in another few sessions' time. If the game continues to develop as it has, I figure we'll either work out what is happening, or we'll end up with the long sleeve jacket on, or maybe both. Who knows? And if you have any experience of Cult, then do let me know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and opinions, of course. And as always, if you haven't subscribed already, please do click the subscribe and like buttons below. It really does help the channel grow, and it really does help keep me sane. See you next time.